Andrea Johnson has just admitted that her knowledge about the alleged misuse of South Africa's Secret Service fund did not come from any investigation by IDAC. Instead, she said she knew about it from older, well-known criminal cases, including those involving Jackie Salebi, Richard Madluli, and Solly Lazarus. She also confirmed something important. When she previously testified before the ad hoc committee, IDAC had not investigated the allegation that Secret Service fund money was given to Bheki Cele. She also said that she is not aware of any new IDAC investigation into those allegations either. It is clear that Johnson has admitted there was no IDAC investigation backing up those specific claims when she gave her earlier evidence. We are certain this may weaken the basis of her previous testimony, though the Commission will ultimately determine the significance of that admission. If you enjoy our coverage of the Madlanga Commission, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest updates. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this admission changes the credibility of Johnson's earlier testimony? Let's hear what she has to say. Cello, roll the clip.
On the same topic, this now is a question from Ms. T. Sokanyile. And the question is, Advocate Johnson, on paragraph 29 of your sworn statement, you indicate that the key challenge in relation to CI is the use of funds. What and where are the gaps in relation to this accountability? Can you reflect on that? Your response states, and I quote, this would have arisen from previous investigations that were done and not in IDEC. Can you tell us? My understanding is the concerns around the abuse of secret funds doesn't arise from any investigations done by IDEC, but that there had been previous investigations. I don't know if those investigations established the abuse of the funds. So if you could just shed more light on that, because beyond that, you then talk about the checks and balances that are necessary in the Auditor General's office to properly regulate and audit the use of these funds and the like.
Correct. Chair, there weren't such investigations at the time in IDEC, but there had been investigations previously in other law enforcement agencies, but where, amongst others, the Directorate Special Operations, DSO, or colloquially the Scorpions. These matters arose way back in 2006-2007 when Advocate Harry Nell and I prosecuted the corruption matter of the late Police Commissioner Jackie Salebi. It was in that process that we first came to understand that there was use and abuse of the Secret Service funds. Fast forward a few years later, there were investigations then launched against the previous Divisional Commissioner, one Mr. Richard Madluli. And these matters, the Madluli matter is currently a part-heard matter in the Johannesburg High Court. It just took a long time. There were legal representation issues. And then one matter that had then since been finalized, also in the misappropriation and use of the slush funds, was charging the CFO of the matter of Crime Intelligence, Major General Solly Lazarus, who was found guilty, Chair, and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. And Advocate Nell and I had also been vested with that matter, but close to its completion, I had stepped down as I had been reassigned to another office. The Madluli matter is within the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in Pretoria, but there were IDEC investigators, prosecutors that assisted in prosecuting that matter as it currently stands. So that is where my direct knowledge came from. It is from prosecutions that we conducted.
Can I just clarify, even if it's just for information? It wasn't clear to me in your ad hoc committee transcript about your testimony about Lazarus, who is now serving prison term. At some point, I got the impression that he was CFO of the SAPS. Was he crime intelligence?
He was the CFO of crime intelligence, okay. Commissioner Balwe.
Okay. And the conviction is about his use of crime intelligence, because there was somewhere you spoke about a vehicle, a tender of vehicles, and then him getting a vehicle for himself and for his daughter. And I got the impression that's as far as it went. Was it more than that?
About the slush funds, it was fraud and corruption. And I didn't finish off with the matter, so I'm not sure what all he was finally convicted of, but he was convicted.
But the charge was about use of the slush funds.
Use of the slush funds. That's how it initially started.
Okay.
How the prosecution ended.
Thank you.
Might be different, yes.
Thank you.
And these cases you reference, thank you, Commissioner Balwe. These cases you reference were all investigated, if I understand, in the first part of 2000s.
From 2006 onwards, yes.
Any of them, those investigations, fairly recent, let's say in the last 5-6 years, that you are aware?
Not that I wouldn't be aware, only because any of those matters then would have happened before the advent of the ID in 2019. And if there were such matters, Chair, they would have gone to the DPCI, the Directorate Priority Crimes Investigations, to deal with those matters, as it would also fall within their serious economic offences and their serious corruption mandate. So one would have to check there. I would like to think that even if there were matters prior to the advent of the ID, they would have gone somewhere for them to have been considered. And that would have been the only place they could have gone to, as they had the previous DSO mandate.
No, thank you. You recall that
if at the time of this testimony, which has been quoted here, if IDEF were investigating Mr. Adams's allegation of funds being used for the benefit of former Minister Cele, that would have been an investigation that you would have spoken to.
Yes, ma'am.
You would have had to say, we are presently seized with one investigation.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
This morning we did a recap about, on what the supplementary affidavits informed IDEC. And the last supplementary affidavit, as commissioned by investigator Rapesu, is the one at file 93493. We can put away file 3 for now, Chair. Thank you. When we touched on paragraph 3, wherein Mr. Adams indicates that amongst the information he had received in October 24, it was alleged that Secret Service funds were used to purchase resources for PKTT, and that this team was previously led by Divisional Commissioner of Crime Intelligence, Lieutenant General Kumalo, who has close ties with the former minister, and that it is alleged that the resources procured under the ban of the task team were for the benefit of Mr. B.H. Cele and others. Now, when we dealt with the supplementary affidavit, and I pointed out that complaints concerning the PKTT don't form part of the Section 27 affidavit, and we discussed the possibility of there being perhaps another Section 27 that specifically references the PKTT. You, if I understood you correctly, you advised that you were not aware of any investigation into the PKTT.
Correct.
Did I understand you correctly?
Correct.
And you did not say, but the conclusion I drew is that for the first time yesterday at this commission, you found out that actually there had been an investigation of some kind into the affairs of the PKTT.
That there is an allegation in a supplementary.
There's that is more precise, you're quite correct. There's an allegation in the supplementary which supports a call for an investigation because it's supplementing the very section 27.
That is correct.
And you learned of that yesterday. I would like to turn our attention to, still staying with file 9, CJC 392.2, that should be at page 3362. No, that's at 3361, Chair. Same file 9 where we see the supplementary.
3361.
3361, yes. In fact, let's start at 3360. This is at 3360, it's a letter you wrote addressed to the National Commissioner. And it reads, this office refers to the information previously requested in terms of section 28 of the NPA Act, to which your office complied. And then at paragraph 3, you indicate attached here to is a section 28 subpoena requesting further information. And that subpoena starts at 3361. You see that?
I see that.
And that subpoena has got a date stamp of the 3rd of April, 2025. And if you look at 3362, it has, under the heading details of the matter or other information, and I quote, this investigation pertains to unlawful promotion, appointment of personnel within the Division Crime Intelligence of the South African Police Service. Where does that matter come from? Because paragraph 5 of Mr. Adams's affidavit complains specifically about the promotion, not even the promotion, the appointment of General Kumalo as the Divisional Commissioner of Crime Intelligence. How do we land where the subpoena now implies that there's a full-blown investigation into promotions, appointments of personnel within crime intelligence? Appointment was by deviation. The complaint was that the appointment, original complaint, was that the appointment was effected without an interview process. Do you recall?
I cannot recall, but I would have been given this information by the investigators because they ordinarily brought these subpoenas.
Okay.
Just for information, is this a concept that exists in the context of appointments? I know of the concept, for example, in the context of procurement, where instead of going through the usual routes, like inviting quotations and the final one being an open public tender system. But something that would ordinarily fall under the latter or this last category may be done through what is called a deviation. For example, if services are required urgently. So you talk about deviation. Do you ever talk about deviation in the context of employment? I'm not saying you don't. No. I just need you to edify me. Yeah.
If I can explain it in the NPA context, as I understand it there, and it relates then to government as a whole. Ordinarily, posts must be advertised with all the bells and whistles that go with it in terms of format, forum, how long it lays, all of that. when you find that you may not, after the entire process of applicants and the sifting thereof, you find that there aren't sufficient suitable candidates, it's one of two things. You re-advertise, which in itself is again a costly exercise, or you ask for a deviation of the process. And you're allowed to ask for a deviation of the process through your department and through Treasury, which allows for, and you'll forgive me, but for the loosely worded headhunting exercise, where you would then be able to identify somebody that is suitable for that position. It is in that context, Chair, that the word deviation is used within the recruitment framework.
So it is something, it's a concept that does exist.
It does exist.
Thank you.
Because you need approval for it. It's out of the ordinary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wait, the notion of deviation to headhunting.
Correct. At least in our space, we tend to, it's easier to use that word.
Now, is headhunting in specific circumstances, is it per se illegal, unlawful? Is it supported by law that the right authority may elect to headhunt?
It is supported by law, provided that there's certain prescripts that must be adhered to. So if those prescripts are not adhered to, then it makes it an unlawful exercise.
An irregular, yes. But then we know, having dealt with paragraph 5 of Mr. Adams's affidavit, that this is purely a question of how General Khumalo was appointed by the former Minister of Police, and I think we have agreed that that would not necessarily fall within the mandate of IDEC. You recall when we were looking at the suspicion that Mr. Adams has expressed at paragraph 5.
Yes.
The fact that you ask for the detail here and the documentation to support that deviation, quote unquote, does not in and of itself bring it within the ambit of IDEC. So you were acting outside your mandate there?
No, Chair. We needed to consider whether or not, in terms of the the allegations of more especially the fraud and or corruption, if in the alleged deviation that had taken place.
Where does that fraud and corruption come?
I understand it.
Also, my apologies. Now you are imputing corruption in the deviation and fraud. Where do those notions now come from? We start from paragraph 5 of the referral affidavit. We don't have a supplementary affidavit. We have just established on the issue of the appointment of General Khumalo. How do we even land on fraud or corruption? We have just, I think, agreed that deviation, which is headhunting, properly executed and following applicable prescripts, is permissible. When did we get to fraud and corruption, and how?
Can we just, I know you say that, Council, that we didn't, we only had the 27. If you look at the date of, the summons is 3 April.
April.
By then we ought to have had the supplementary affidavits from Mr. Adams.
Yeah, we have them. Remember, yes. they are taken on the 6th of January.
Yes.
And we have clarified this morning what topics they specifically covered.
Yes, if I could just cast my mind. Yeah, that was the color. It's confusing about which one I must now cast my mind to, because you've given me 2 sets and one of which I only saw yesterday, but I cast my mind to the first set I've seen. Yes. But I assume. If you look at, sorry, Commissioners, And sorry, Chair, I don't want you to play dice with the files, but it is in file 9. If we go to 3475. 3475.
Okay.
File 9.
Yes.
And this having been taken on the 6th of January, the subpoena being the 3rd of April, paragraph 2, on or about early October 24, I received information anonymously surrounding alleged fraud and corruption perpetrated by General Masemola, National Commission of the South African Police Services, and other senior generals of SAPS. The allegations related to the highly questionable appointment of General Khumalo as the head of crime intelligence nationally. The former Minister of Police, Bheki Cele, was also involved in this, while several highly skilled generals within CI were overlooked. That is where they would have put into the subpoena, Chair, the fraud and corruption to which I referred. This is the document having been drafted then by investigators. By the investigators and prosecutors.
No, not investigators. We dealt with this yesterday.
Yes, the information from the investigators. This is a document that would be compiled by the prosecutors, and this is where that information of fraud and corruption would have come from. I conclude.
We settled this yesterday. What you are looking at is Mr. Perumal's affidavit.
Yes.
That's not the investigators' plural affidavit.
Yes.
And this is the questionable affidavit as to when Mr. Perumal took this, took this statement and commissioned it.
And not only when, there's also the question of where, which is quite the Cape Town Pretoria issue.
So this I would think, based on our conversation yesterday, as to what constitute the true supplementary affidavits or statements by Mr. Adams. This cannot be one of them, because you have Advocate Ramsamy and investigator Rapesu, who say they don't know where these documents come from. And there's a question, and a serious question, whether or not they were fabricated within IDEC. Because the two of a three-man team of investigators that engaged Mr. Adams completely disavow these documents, including the very one you've just relied upon. To assist you, besides that affidavit you rely on, personally I'm not aware of any other document
no,
being awarded as a result of alleged corrupt practices. That can be talking to the original paragraph 5. And even if we say they were, how that then lands you on Lieutenant General Khumalo is difficult for me to appreciate for the moment. But however you landed there this morning, you considered that would still not be a matter that falls within the mandate of IDEC.
that is correct, no matter which way we debate it.
Yes. And then if we go back to our section 28, still staying with file 9, we're at page 3363. Yes,
Are you still coming back to this document, or are you done with it? 3363.
I'm 3363. That's where I'm going now.
You're busy with it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Staying then with 3363. If we say this, what we are dealing with at 3363, in my reading, is much like the Mukwele matter. Items 1 to 5. These seems like what the documents requested relate all to the employment and recruitment of General Khumalo. And you remember the exercise that Commissioner Khumalo took you through to establish that the employment of Brigadier Mukwele, absent any unlawfulness and fraud and corruption, is purely an employment matter and doesn't fall within the mandate of. And my proposition to you is similarly here.
Which is what I had
Yes.
alluded to previously, must then be dealt with differently.
Which then would mean the requested information from items 1 to 5 ought not to be part of the section 28.
Correct.
Now, my interest really lies in items 6 and 7.
Before you do item 6 and 7.
Yes, ma'am.
Item 2, it's you seeking a list of all provincial heads and section heads, major generals in crime intelligence. You want their performance assessments for 2022, I think you meant 2023. You want all documentation related to 2 previous advertised processes, and you list what you want. You want, among others, panel appointments, long lists, short lists, interview records. You want audio and video recordings of interviews. 4, you want to know about records wherein Lieutenant General Jacobs' refusal to return to crime intelligence. You also want an affidavit indicating whether Lieutenant General Jacobs has any civil or labor proceedings pending regarding his temporary transfer as Divisional Commissioner of Crime Intelligence. 2 questions. Where in the section 27 do these come from? That there are issues about performance assessment, that there are issues about provincial heads and section heads, that there are issues about Lieutenant General Jacobs. Where, that's the first question. Where in your section 27 does this come from? That's the first question. The second question is, what does it have to do with your mandate? What happened with Lieutenant General Jacobs? What happened with interviews? What performance assessments of major generals in 2022, 2023? What does, that's the second question. What does that have to do with the mandate? So you can answer the first question, which is where do this looking at the section 27 of Mr. Adams, the one that's before us, where does these questions come from? Or where do these questions, where do these questions come from?
Commissioner Bulloy, for me, these questions would seek to determine whether or not there was a necessity for the deviation, whether or not there were suitable persons within crime intelligence based on their history and performance, and given that there should not have been a deviation, and the allegation then that there was corruption and fraud in how these processes were run. That is how I took it to read.
Well, Mr. Adams doesn't say anything about performance assessments. He says the appointment of General Khumalo, who did not qualify to be appointed, and other generals, and he doesn't say who. You sign off on a summons that requires information of provincial heads and section heads. You want the performance assessments. I don't see how that arises from Mr. Adams's affidavit. You can go and read paragraph 5 again. Even the supplementaries, I don't see where this comes from.
For for me, Commissioner Baloy, this comes from what evidence would be required to prove the alleged deviation and or irregularity.
How would an assessment, how would records of assessments say anything about a deviation, whether a deviation was warranted or not? You look at the memorandum that justified the request for a deviation and the approval, and that's what you assess. Performance assessments have nothing to do with it, unless I don't know how things work in government.
No, I don't dispute that you don't.
Yes.
What I'm saying is it would have given a better picture of whether or not there were other suitable candidates within the ambit of crime intelligence, and that you would therefore not have had to deviate, but could have gone on the normal process of advertising for those positions.
Yeah,
and that would make the sorry.
Even if you found that this deviation request, which was approved, was not warranted, why would that, without more, indicate to you that we have a case to investigate, maybe there's corruption? Surely it doesn't follow.
No.
It doesn't. You accept it doesn't follow. Then Jacobs, General Jacobs, how does he enter the picture? Nothing has been said about his refusal to anything at all. In fact, he's not mentioned at all. You single him out, and you know that he has refused to return to crime intelligence, even though Mr. Adams doesn't say that in his affidavit. He doesn't mention him at all, let alone that he has refused to return to crime intelligence. And the next paragraph in 5, where does that come from?
Lieutenant, General Jacobs at the time was the head of crime intelligence.
Yes.
So what this sought to determine was what was the reason for him not going back, which necessitated the appointment of a different head.
Mr. Adams doesn't say anything about him. He doesn't say anything. I'm assuming you don't go on a frolic of your own. You don't decide, oh, I happen to know, which obviously your investigators knew something about it. You obviously knew something about it. You wouldn't have signed off if you didn't know anything about it. You didn't know about it from Mr. Adams' affidavit. It's very specific. You're not asking what happened to Lieutenant Jacobs, which I would still ask you, why did you think something happened to him? Here, you know it's very clear. You know that he has refused to return to crime intelligence. Where do you get that from? It's not in the section 27 affidavit. It's not in the supplementary affidavit, which at this point are the only documents that speak to appointments in crime intelligence. Where do you get it from that General Jacobs has refused to go to crime intelligence? Someone told you that. They told your investigators, and they didn't tell you in any of the documents that are before us. So my question is, you are signing off on information that is not on record. Who told you or your investigators about General Jacobs that you decide it's a matter that we must look into? It is certainly not in the documents that have been presented to you. So it's fair for me to surmise that on the properly obtained information, which is the affidavit and the statements, nothing of sorts was said. It can only leave one explanation, that this is information obtained in other ways, which are not properly explained on documents. You accept that?
I accept that.
You accept that?